Can I get some batteries? Good morning. It is good to see you. We've had some nice days recently, and hoping to have some relatively warmer temperatures today. If you want to be turning to the book of Joel, chapter 1. Before we get into that, just some little bit of human interest, whatever you want to call it. I've been I've been noticing. I don't know if how much you've been following about the politics in California, or the mayor of New York is being indicted with, I think, 4 or 5 different charges of taking campaign funds, not legally, etc. The mayor of Los Angeles media is just now coming out with, she's under a lot of attack, obviously, for a lot of different things. One of which was a friend of hers that she promoted to a job over certain things in city service, which had to do with water supply eventually and all that, and $750,000 a year for this job. And she's taking a lot of criticism for a lot of different things, making LA or continuing it to be a sanctuary city, the homelessness issue and all that. And now with fires, because from the reports I've been looking at, there's been a really questionable decisions made about, they uncovered a report that Newsom had made a few years ago about blowing up dams, and this is all about environment and all that. And the thing about those, New York City and Los Angeles, and we know about those kinds of places, very different from where we live, but the concerns, and it's kind of interesting now that she's under attack, media is coming out with her Cuban relationship and her respect for Castro when she was young, and how she's very involved in socialist kinds of agendas. And now that's coming out, which suggests to me, several things are going on. One is the agendas that are bringing people into powerful positions that are not based on job performance or whatever. It's kind of like a former president, when he was going to choose a running mate, said, she will be female and she will be a minority. And so what he was doing is taking the pool of available, and see, you can do that in public office. You can't do that as well in corporations, because ultimately you're going to have to give an account directly or indirectly to stockholders. There are people who are going to keep you kind of honest. And that's been the big thing about DEI in corporations is, if you are a inclusive hire, you're only going to make it so high, because at some point there has to be a demonstration of capability. And if you have the capability, you don't need DEI to get advancement or hire or whatever. But what it's demonstrated is, and I've talked about this several times, about agendas that, artificially created agendas that this is what we're working toward. I mentioned to you a while back about in Europe, and even like Cadillac, some places, automakers said 2 or 3 years ago, we're going to be all electric by 2035. And that's all out the window. And from my perspective, there's not an understanding of a loss of faith in doing that, loss of trust in doing those things, because there's an agenda. We got to save the planet, and to save the planet, we've got to clean the air, and to clean the air, we've got to quit, burning fossil fuels. And I've shared with you the way you do those kinds of things. If you're automakers, you get with scientists, you get with environmentalists, and say, where are we on the environment? What do we need to do? Well, we need to do this, that, or whatever. All right. How long is it going to take us to create the technology to have a totally electric vehicle? Well, it's going to take us 20 years or 15 years or whatever. Why? Because we need this technology to get together with this technology. We need to be able to get, we don't have infrastructure for sourcing the heavy metals and all that we need to make batteries. All right. So project, how long will it take us to do that? Well, it will take this amount of time. It'll take 15 years, okay? And I just pull that number out of the air. All right. We're going to start working on that, and we're going to project that in 15 years, we will be able to start making electric automobiles, okay? That's the way you do business. And stay with us, because these things can change. It's hard to predict the world in 15 years, but we're on a scale. And all of these technologies we're assuming will fall into place. We're going to work toward doing that. And so 5 years we'll make a prognostication. 10 years we'll make a prognostication that it looked like we're going to be able to do this, but because of this and this, we're going to have to extend that, et cetera. And then when we have the technologies, we'll start creating those cars. That's not the way this has been done. What's been done is we have an agenda. And we've got to achieve this agenda by prognostication by this date, okay? Do we have the technology to do that? No. But we'll hope to develop it. Now, guys, in the automobile industry, this has been happening for years and years, where the government says, by this day, you need to have emissions at this point. And that's why your cars have become, in part, why they've become so complicated. Because to get the extra miles per gallon out of a car that you can drive on the highway, et cetera, they have to keep chasing, whether it's fuel injection, whether it's electronics, whether it's, what used to be a 4-speed transmission, then a 6-speed, then a 10-speed, and et cetera, just to get an extra mile or two per gallon. And at the time, the technology wasn't there, but when the government said the mandate by 2025 all cars will do this, then you rush and do that. And there's only so much you can squeeze out of things, and so you have to push that, push that, push that. And so what happens now, we have much more complicated automobiles because the agenda is pushing it, not science and not economics. And that's what's happening. Now, here's the thing. If it comes back to these fires that are in California, knows they have fires, okay? We hear about them just about every year. And so ideally that would be one of your first priorities, is put into place everything that it takes to be able to, and it might be having huge reservoirs of water in a fire station on every block, whatever. But when you have an agenda, and the agenda promotes folks, it's not based on you were good as a manager, you're good as an assistant manager, you're good as a regional manager. It's not based on proving yourself. It's being plucked out because you're a certain gender or a certain race or a certain situation. You can be put in this position whether or not you have the capabilities of it. That's agenda-driven. What I want you to understand, if this all comes back on her and Newsom and all of that, then indeed there was bad decisions made. Changing that, you can get them out of office. But the damage that has been done and how it's being passed around, so many people are having to bear with it. It takes generations to overcome those kinds of things. And one of the dangers is folks are being, like when you say, I'm going to choose a vice president running mate that's female and from a minority, Now, if she's the best for the job, she doesn't need that, okay? Because she's best at doing that. It doesn't matter if she's female, it doesn't matter if she's minority. But if you're saying we're going to exclude everybody but this, you may get the best of that group. But here's the thing, if we've done this based on an agenda, what makes me believe it's going to be the best of that group then? You see, because it's not based on merit, etc. What I'm trying to get at is, when we get away from God's way of doing things, personal responsibility and all those, there's damage. But when it comes, and again, you can only go so far in the corporate world, and you're going to be shut down because, corporations are rolling over right now about so many things going on. When Bud Light was brought to the fore of, you guys are making bad choices based on bad agendas, and it's cost us billions. Now, you don't hear much about it, but I'm telling you, within that corporation, there is a earthquake that has, and so many others like it. And that's why one of the things that has happened in the change of administrations is there's now a dumping of DEI. There's going to be devastation with that. Guys, in 1973, when our Supreme Court said it's illegal to kill a child, we're going to be divided from now on. See, you go back and you change that. And when that was submitted, it made a lot of Americans very angry. Now, if those Americans get their way, it's going to make a lot of other Americans very angry. So it's just back and forth. What shouldn't have been presented in the first case cannot be undone. The ramifications, and what will happen is what we're having here is one administration will come in and try to change everything that the other administration, and it makes us back and forth, no stability, no trust. And it's devastating. And that's why a call to back to God, back to truth, back to honesty, back to intelligence, back to having a reason, a foundation for the choices that we're making that is in truth, in right, et cetera, et cetera. That's why that's so important to the future of this nation as United States. So when you see those things like in the news, and you find out that, and so many of the, so many public figures are now saying that Karen Bass is not, she doesn't have a future in politics. That's the governor of that's the mayor of Los Angeles. She doesn't have a chance because so many of these things have, so many of things that could have been discovered before she was put in that position. But California voters, and this is not on her, this is on voters voting people because of they have shared into an agenda. And so you've got Trudeau, who's now resigned in Canada, very, very liberal, because folks put him in office, wreaked a lot of damage, and now they're suffering for it. And and he has felt the heat of that and resigned. He's still in office until he can kind of get cronies, et cetera. But, because that's the way you do it. The devastation, that's the point that I'm trying to make, is it reeks, there's wakes behind this. And people don't consider that. That, if we have another election and get another person, everything's going to change. And it's not. Because the damage has been done, and that's visited from generation to generation. That's how we end up in a situation like Joel's. Okay? And there's some things about that I want us to look at about one of the things that frustrates folks when they study the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is kind of like in Monty Python in the Holy Grail, how they kind of made fun of Elizabethan, especially, demonstration of when they're talking about have you seen the movie? Was it the rabbit from Antioch? They're trying to blow it up with the holy hand grenade. And so they're reading the instructions about how to use the holy hand grenade. And it talked about pull the pin and wait 3 seconds. It said, wait 3 seconds. The number of the seconds shall be 3. You shall not throw it at 2 seconds, nor at 1 second. Nor shall you wait till 4 seconds. 3 is the number. And he just goes on and on and on about how long to count, and et cetera. And it's casting fun at some of the ways that the Old Testament is written. Because God describes things almost like you would in a court of law. And I want you to see that here, and that's one reason, and I want us to address that. Why does he get so specific? And if you're someone who is easygoing, that kind of grates on you. And for instance, if I were going to say, a robber went into a bank and he stole all the money that they had in the bank. All right, you've got the picture. If I say a robber went into the bank and he took all of the money in the bank, he took all of the ones, he took all of the fives, he took all of the tens, he also took all of the 20s and all of the 50s and all of the hundreds. And you're now pulling your hair out because you said he took all the money. We assume he took ones. We assume he took fives. We assume whatever was there, whatever denomination. Why are you, and guys, authors that write that way just crawl all over me. That's how God describes. And I want us to look at why. If you say all, it means all. You don't have to say ones and fives. Why would you do that? All right. Look at verse 8 of chapter 1. You're going to see this through the book. Verse 8. Wail like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth. The grain offering and the libation are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord. The field is ruined. The land mourns, for the grain is ruined. The new wine dries up. Fresh oil fails. Be ashamed, O farmers. Wail, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field is destroyed. The vine dries up, the fig tree fails, the pomegranate, the palm also, and the apple trees, all the trees of the field dry up. Indeed, rejoicing dries up from the sons of men. So, God through Joel is describing this famine, describing the failure of the crops and all of those kinds of things. And he's getting into great detail of it. By the way, while we're here, look down at verse 19. To thee, O Lord, I cry, for the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame has burned up all the trees of the field. Even the beasts of the field pant for thee, for the water brooks are dried up, and fire has devoured the pastures of the wickedness. Do you see the progression? We have locusts that come through, 4 waves of them. And they eat the fruit, then they eat the tree itself, then they eat the bark and leave the branches white, which means all the bark is gone. They're ultimately destroying. All right, when you have that, you have famine. What happens when you have famine? But it doesn't travel by itself. What happens when you have famine? Say what? Everything dies. When everything dies, what happens? Chaos. People become savage. Okay. That's going to be the outcome of it. You're going to have a lot of theft. You're going to have a lot of all those kinds of things. But when you don't have food to eat, what else happens? Okay. Of what? Who? People? Animals. Okay. If there's nothing for the animals to eat, what's going to happen? They're going to migrate or die. And they're pretty smart about these things. Okay? So they're going to migrate or die. Now, what happens when you have famine and pestilence? And he describes it here. We're out of water because we don't have shade, we don't have protection. And remember, if you remember our stages, when people fall into sin, the first stage is to withdraw protection. What I want you to understand from that, it doesn't matter if God sent the locust or the locust came on their own, because he either sent them or he wasn't protecting people from them. Now, what does that mean? That we live day and night without pestilence, do not realizing we're being protected from that. Not realizing that we're being protected from drought. We're being protected from the loss of beasts because of drought. The loss of water because of drought. What comes with the loss of water? i.e. California. What happens with the loss of water? Fire. What does fire do? It not only destroys what's left of the crops, it destroys our houses. It destroys us. So what you're seeing in Joel is the standard. Guys, the issue is not drought. The issue is what drought starts. And it's a domino effect. And where it starts is God just says, you're on your own. In a world that is unbalanced, and it's unbalanced because of the fall. In fact, it's not just unbalanced, it's at war with itself. And what makes the world safe for you and me is the protection of God. And guys, he has protected this nation over and over and over, hasn't he? I don't think many of us realize how close the world came to losing World War II. And all God would have had to do, step back. You see, you can't, when you go through life like a bull in a china shop, all you see is the stuff behind you. You don't see the devastation that you leave. I mean, the stuff in front of you, okay? And you see the stuff that you knock over or whatever. What you're not seeing is all of the things that Satan is trying to hurl at you to destroy, and God's intercepting. And the ones that he lets through that we can then complain about are the ones that he designs to be used by us to grow. And so he, like in Job's case, he allowed Satan to go pretty extreme on Job because he trusted Job. But part of that was to develop Job's faith, which at the end he had a much greater faith, but also to develop your faith and my faith. When God removes his protection, that's devastating enough. Now, when he adds his own devastation, whoo! We don't want that. We can't handle that. And so now let's go back to, remember, he stole everything at the bank. He took all the ones, he took all the fives, he took all, by the way, what I didn't add, he took all the quarters, he took all the pennies, took all the dimes, took all the Susan B. Anthony's, took all the silver dollars, you know. And when you read that, you just, I got it. Now, why does he do that? Emphasis, good. Pardon me? Some people don't get it. He wants everybody to get it, right? Did they get it? Did they go into captivity? They didn't get it. Okay? So he's dealing with children, kind of. You know? Like, son, go put shoes on. What I have to say, son, go to your bedroom, open your top drawer, get some socks out, put a sock on each foot. Take your left shoe, not your tennis shoes, not your sports shoes. Take the, not your sandals. You see, you have to do that with a child. And it's exhausting, isn't it? Because you'll always hear, but you didn't say. Do I have to say? Do I have to say? So, does he have to say? Pomegranates, palm trees, apple trees, fig trees, the vine. If it's all destroyed, it's all destroyed. Why is he doing this? Because some people don't get it. To emphasize. Why else? He wants us to get it. But we're not always clear on what he wants us to get. One of the things that I'm ornery enough that I would have trouble on the stand. I would like to think that I would be mature and Christ-like and all of that. But when the bailiff says, Stephen Parker, would you please take the stand? And then the attorney says, please state your name. Who did you call? Why does he ask? You just call Stephen Parker. Nobody wants to volunteer to be on the stand. Why do you ask me my name? Why do you ask me my name and don't ask to see my driver's license? Why do they do that? Exactly. This is legal. Everything has to be legal. And you're going to be asked a lot of seemingly stupid questions that are sometimes redundant to try to find out if there's inconsistency or whatever. But the reason is it's got to be specific. Guys, the reason God is doing this is an indictment. This is a legal indictment between God and his people under the law. You've got to be specific in the law because generalities create what? Loopholes. Yeah, but you didn't say. Yeah, but you know, it all depends on what the definition of is. And that's what lawyers do. And God is dealing with a bunch of lawyers. He's dealing with legalists. He's dealing with people who love the law. Not just love his law, they love law. They love arguing law. They love defining law, that down to mint and cumin, guys, down to how far you can walk on the Sabbath day before it's considered work. They love those kinds of things. And rabbis throughout the centuries loved arguing about those things. So God's going to write out an indictment, and he's going to do it several times in the prophets. And he's got to cover all the bases. He's got to leave no squirm room. So he's got to define everything because the fig trees are gone. Yeah, because y'all sinned. Well, what happened to the pomegranate? So I took the fig tree, I took the pomegranate tree, I took all, and he has to list them. The olive tree, the vines, I took them all. Oh, okay. Because if he had said, I took them all, they wouldn't know how far all goes. It's like, well, he took all the money. Well, did you take the fives? Did you take the quarters? Did you take the parking tokens? You know, those have a certain amount of value. So he defines it. The field is ruined, the land mourns, grain is ruined, new vine dries up, fresh oil fades, because the harvest of the field is destroyed. Vine dries up, fig trees fail, pomegranate, palm also, the apple tree, all the trees of the field dry up. And that's that legalese at the end. This will go for people that live in Tahlequah. This will go for people that live in Moody's. This will go for the people who live in Gore and all outlying areas. You see, those generalities go at the end to include everything, but you specify because you want people, well, what about us in Tahlequah? I said Tahlequah. So God is having to deal with lawyers with indictment. And the indictment first begins with, I have removed my protection. 2, I have brought you calamity. And it ends up with fire. You see, we thought we had lost everything when the locusts came through because we got nothing to eat. Our beasts have nothing to eat. And he's going to talk about that they're out in the fields complaining because there's no water and there's nothing to eat. You see, we start with us, but you've got to understand this domino effect. And what the locusts didn't take, because we don't have water and because there's a drought, and all of this is interrelated, please remember that. Certain parts of LA County are not going to have shade for a long, long time. And that's going to create other problems. Just having shade, generation of oxygen, all kinds of things, okay? It's not just fire. It's not just locusts. It's not just famine. It starts impacting everything. And all God had to do was remove his protection. And he didn't have to declare he was doing it. From this point on, you're on your own. Because I warned you, I don't have to tell you, oh, all right, on this day at 5 p.m., I'm removing my protection. And you're going to be in trouble. And it's going to take you a little while to figure out you're in trouble. And so, in verse 9, the grain offering and the libation are cut off from the house of the Lord. Now, when he introduced this, he said in verse 6, for a nation has invaded my land. Mighty and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion. It has the fangs of a lioness. It has made my vine a waste, and my fig tree splinters. It has stripped them bare and cast them away. Their branches have become white. Verse 9, the grain offering and the libation are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord. What's he saying? What's one of the dominoes in this? You can't offer sacrifices. I can no longer be worshiped. Guys, what happens when the cattle die or leave? What happens when the sheep die? And he's going to talk about them. What happens? No sacrifice. Because we're going to make sure we eat first, aren't we? Now, I understand we're very willing to give the first fruits if we've got fruits. But we'll say, and guys, we do this. There are folks in every congregation of the Lord's people who say, well, I can't lay by because I've got these debts or these responsibilities I made, by the way. But I can't sacrifice, I can't give, I can't be part of contribution because I've got these responsibilities, or I had this calamity or come or whatever. And God is saying, I am now. Now, if that's the case, what does that mean? If there are no grain offerings, no fruit offerings, if the cattle and the sheep die, what happens? What are cattle and sheep used for in terms of God? Sin offerings. Have you ever thought what would happen of a blight? Can anybody in this room remember recently folks divesting themselves of cattle in this area? Because they were losing money? Because they couldn't get grain? They couldn't get hay? Does anybody remember? That's been in the last decade. Okay? And that came from a mini famine. Now, we're in a large enough nation, we can mitigate some of this. If California's having a famine, we can send them food. Because we don't treat them as a different government. And that's the confusion of having 50 states that are one, but each with government and all that. There were ranchers who were losing all kinds of money because their cattle didn't have enough to eat. And all it takes is a drought, and there's not enough water. And so you divest yourself. You sell them to somebody out of state or somebody out of the geography where they do have those things at a loss. Now, if you need those things to offer sacrifice for sin, what happens? It's gone. If the sacrifice for sin is gone, what happens to the sin? It's still there. Have you ever considered the relationship between sin and animals that are dependent upon crops and water to sustain their lives in order to be slaughtered for God, not slaughtered by the environment, by Mother Nature? Have you ever thought about that? Because, see, we can't relate to that. We don't need something physical to be a part of getting rid of our sin. Well, we do. His name was Jesus. Once and for all. Thank God, once and for all, because if you don't live in cattle country and cattle country has calamity, you can't get your sins forgiven. It's that simple, according to the law. God says, you know what? They came into my land, destroyed my vines, destroyed my crops, and now I can't get a thank offering. Now I can't get any kind of, ultimately any kind of an offering. This has happened to me. And you think it's happened to you. But it's happened to you indirectly because it's happening to me. This is all mine, and you have forgotten that. And if you forget that it's all mine, I may have to take it away from you to remind you it's all mine. Do you hear what I just said? If it is all mine, and you forget and do not give me glory, do not act as stewards of what is mine rather than owners of what is mine, I may have to take it away from you to remind you who is God. And it's very easy for him to take it away from us. This, this cosmos that is in war with itself is already so unbalanced that all you have to do is pull out a prop. As I was saying last week, in order to create famine, all God has to do is where there are clouds, go, you don't know He's doing it. But the clouds depart. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. Certainly no longer than a day. Yeah, because on His heel come another. Now, I want you to remember something. Satan came to God and asked for what? Permission. And he even complained about the second round. He complained because you're protecting his body. You let me go after his body, he will turn on you. He was accusing God of protecting Job. Was God protecting Job? Yes. And all he had to do was remove his protection. And that's giving Satan the permission to do whatever is not limited by his. Please understand, his protection comes in degrees. There's limited protection, there's total protection, and God be with us if He removes total protection. Because we are just talking about physical things in the cosmos. We haven't even gotten to opposing armies, although He's talked about that. He's describing these locusts as an army. And they got teeth like lions, fangs like the lioness. They can rip you apart. Now, that's what's going to come, but He's using a metaphor that they can get their heads around of losing or leaving protection. Guys, He didn't have to bring Babylon. He just had to step back. Nations automatically do that. That's what empires do, that. I mean, oh my goodness. To talk about Greenland becoming a part of the United States and to use military within that same sentence. Guys, I grew up with that concern about the USSR. That they were going to globalize using force, using military. And now we're talking the same thing. How dare you? Now, if you want to talk about, is Greenland for sale? How much? If you want to talk about that, that's fine. But if you want to say, you know what? If you don't agree to it, now we've become our enemies. Satan asked God, just step away from him. I'm not asking you to do anything, but stop protecting him. And Job's wealth, Job, everything that he had came from God's blessing and God's protection. Everything we have in the United States came from God's blessing and God's protection. The only thing He has to do to get rid of the blessings is to get rid of the protection. And we're daring Him as a nation to do that. That's why this book is so important to you and me. Guys, this book should be read, as the Minor Prophets, should be read in Washington, D.C. every day. Before those guys go to work, they ought to read one of these prophets. Because we're walking right into it, and it's like, now, the question was, as Connie was saying, he has to be specific because people don't get it. Did they get it? No. Did the Isaiah, when he wrote, did they get it? Jeremiah, when he wrote, did they get it? No. This is not looking good. We need a reformation. We need a restoration in the United States of America, and it needs to come soon. Read the rest of the book. We will discuss it. He's going to go into more detail, but I want you to understand as you read it, you're reading an indictment. You're reading a legal indictment for crimes against God, humanity, etc. Let's take a break.